when the country was strong. Back before Nixon, before the Vietnam War came along. Before the Beatles and yesterday, when a man could still work and still would. It's the best of the good days behind us now, and all the good times really over for good. And are we rolling downhill like a snowball headed for hell? No hope for the music and or the Liberty Bell. I wish a Ford and a Chevy would still last 10 years like they should. Are the good times behind us now, and are the good times really over for good?
Woo! Oh, fantastic! Digital-Roundtable is on right now. Come and see us. What a great song, John. And thank you for everybody for signing up and listening to us every week. And I know that things are exciting for a lot of people, and maybe it's for some people are a bit crazy with the election and everything. But let me go around and say hello to my cohorts here. Llewelyn, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. I did not stay up all night. I did have a restless night, but I did not stay all night. In fact, I watched a movie because I have had a lot of experience in various newspapers on election, and it's hell. And I don't be reminded of the madness on election night in a big newspaper where you've got a variable flow of news and absolute deadlines, and the two don't mix well.
Yeah.
So I wait to find out the result as near as possible. I like to know who has won. I like to wake up in the morning, but that we have not been granted that mercy.
Well, I tell you what I think about that. America has won. America voted, and America has won.
We shall see how it all plays out.
I know. John, how are you today?
I am doing fine. I too did not stay up all night, but there's something else on my mind. I'm wondering if we could have a change in power or maintenance of power without violence in the streets, from a history point of view, from a study point of view. I find it absolutely interesting that this is the first time I know in my lifetime, including with the assassination of a president in my lifetime, where all of a sudden we're questioning our ability to have a peaceful transfer of powers. So while we find the election very interesting, which is a sameness over the years, the added variable now is the idea of a democracy, and can we switch power players without violence in the street? So I'm reminded, I feel like I'm not in America as I see people board up their buildings and policemen are on standby to see if we in America could violate our history and have riots and disruptions after an election. Absolutely. How did we get to this point?
Yeah. Well, let's get rolling here on things, and I have some interesting insights that have come out this morning. So apparently, the president has still 9 ways of winning, and Vice President Biden has 18 ways of winning. So the combination possibles of winning and losing the different states that are pending. And so in the meantime, I can tell you that, the stock market has reacted to the fact that there's a high probability of a split Senate and House of Representatives to each party. And that has made the market run up on certain stocks like high tech, which probably will not get deregulated, and healthcare, which will not be impacted by a nationwide plan, and several other sectors of the economy. And so all the losses of last week have been gained. Oil crude prices are going down a little more because, again, we're going to stay the course on production and all that. So we're producing as much as we can. And the price of gasoline has gone down 10 cents. From last week. So I just realized that I think I wrote down 0 cents, but it's 10 cents it went down. And so gentlemen, 6 states are to be declared victorious. Senate races, I think there are still 7 Senate races pending, but I think some of the most critical ones didn't get turned over. Some that we're supposed to. So I think that the flipping went back and forth. If there was one on each side or something like that, and there's also no, I think, final determination in Arizona as a state. How do you see the night in terms of the blue wave versus the red wave and what came up to be? And how do you?
Well, this is all too hot at the moment to discuss. Really, it could change within moments. But as I see it, the broad contours of the future are already established, and you both touched on them. Particularly, I sympathize with John. Why are we contemplating? Why are we expecting violence? This is the United States of America. This is atypical of what we do, what we expect. The other broad contours, we're going to see some changes in healthcare because the president's still going to get his hearing in the Supreme Court, even if he is not president, and we're not sure how that's going to be. I suspect by the very latest that I've read that probably Biden will win, but there's no certainty about this. It will be contested by the president. He is that sort of person. He's already declared he will contest it. He is alleging even fraud, which has not been proved and which there is no evidence of whatsoever. We're going to see a lot of messy and ugly litigation, which may or may not be accompanied by messy and ugly demonstrations in the streets. This is a very unfortunate election. It also shows up certain things, one of which is do not trust the polls. I've been railing against polls for many years, not because I don't trust them, I don't, but because they become a great distorter in the electoral process. And the media, my people, are to blame. They go out, commission the polls, and then say, oh, here is a fact. It is not a fact, it is a chimera. And it has no effect whatsoever except to distort the electoral process because suddenly this is perceived to be a truth. But we know they get it wrong, so it can't be a truth. And yet we act throughout the election as though, oh, this is happening, or that's the result of the other thing. The other thing is the Democrats need to really get down and get some younger people, a younger leadership in the House, younger, more energetic candidates, particularly in the presidency. This is a retreaded candidacy. This is not an exciting candidacy in the way that Trump, I beg your pardon, in the way that Obama was or the way that Clinton was. Man, a nice man, a decent man, but oh my God, a retreaded man. He's been around several times and he's been back to the Vulcan shop to get re-Vulcanized. This is not what the Democrats need. The Democrats do not need a leader in the House who has been around a long time. People want excitement, they want change. It is very hard to believe that change comes from the established order. It has already established its change long since. So we know the contours of what's going to happen. It's going to be disputatious period, a difficult period, followed by, one assumes, but one cannot be certain, a Biden presidency, but without the great endorsement of huge successes in the House or getting the Senate. That's how it looks to me today at this time, but it could change.
John?
Yes, well, yeah, thank you for saying that about the polls. I absolutely agree with you. And with all of the data that we have, we've got to stop stepping up and saying who you're going to vote for when we have so much other data. But just let me comment, I think, where we are now in terms of the great election that's going on. My state, Texas, is red. I'm looking here, and New Mexico is blue. And the question is, where will Michigan go? And where will Pennsylvania go, and where will North Carolina go? And don't you find it very, very interesting as to why people are voting? As Llewelyn said, we don't have any excitement in the candidates themselves. It's almost a choice of, well, who shall I vote for? Not necessarily because of the content, but who shall I vote for? And the polls have tried to reimpose demographic characteristics on people, and none of that has planned out. So this is what I think I see as I look at the map and I think about things. I think there would be no change, of course, if the president is elected. Now remember, what's interesting here from a demographic point of view is that all of the things that he said, that people said that Trump is this, Trump is that, it had no effect on people voting for him. Okay, so you had the gender stuff. It had no effect. So they said, well, Mr. Trump, what about your treatment of women? No effect. Women voted for Trump. If you look at what happened in Florida, okay, the population, the newcomers, voted for Trump at a 48 to 49% clip, if you will. And of course, a surprising thing is black males voting for the president. So he's picking up votes in all kinds of different kinds of ways. So what we find here is that the sameness that we have if Mr. Trump is elected, and of course, with the president, is pretty interesting because of the knowledge and know-how of how the country works. On the other hand, as Llewelyn said, if Biden wins, then we're both in a retread kind of situation. So I think that what will happen here is that if Trump wins, then we will continue in a certain kind of way. The expectations are there, everything from the stock market and et cetera. But I think with Biden, people are looking for some levelness. How can you be level? They're looking for certain expectations of a president that takes us back to a situation where there's eloquence in the White House and those kinds of things. So, you know, the numbers tell a story. The violence in the street might tell a story. And more importantly, how many people voted actually tell a story.
Yeah.
That's a very good summation. I would say, though, that I said the contours are established, but what we have not mentioned is the impact that we're likely to have, and which is going to go on, the impact of events on the presidency coming up very fast. We have the COVID-19 virus, which is in a second wave and which is very severe and which the president has had no answer to. He has not taken decisive action. He has not shown leadership. And if anything, he has shown misdirection, giving people a false sense of security and a false sense of well-being, and not encourage simple defensive matters like wearing masks. He also will be facing some grave difficulties with healthcare if his own case triumphs in the Supreme Court and the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, is thrown out by the court. Suddenly you have an enormous number of people, I think it's about 20 million, gasping for healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. So the president may be punished if he remains in power by getting what he wished for, and Biden will have a lot to do to try to put in some remediation for these large things which are coming at us and which are beginning to crush us. The pandemic is, and if we lose basic health care in the country, we will be further crushed by that, because so far the Republicans, despite many protestations, have failed to come up with an alternative plan. So you have a rather unappetizing future with many difficulties. We also have all the possibilities that if Biden wins, we will have continued deadlock with the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who has been reelected, blocking every Democratic initiative he can. And there's no great vote of confidence in the Democrats in the House. So a difficult time in the history of America lies before us.
Well, let me ask you an interesting question, Mr. King. Let's put an interesting hypothesis on the table. There is, and you have seen lots, of course, in Washington, D.C., there is a thought that in a president's second term, when they have no plan of running again, then they kind of do what they want to do. As a matter of fact, there might be a possibility that there's a complete turn in support of issues that he did not support during the first time. So in other words, the base doesn't matter anymore. You're not going to get elected again. So who knows what he might do in terms of healthcare? Who knows what he might do in terms of the pandemic? Who knows what he might do in the future? Have you seen in your time any evidence that in the second term of presidents, that they do about face on what they were elected to do and sort of fall in line, if you will, with the expectations of healthcare and those kind of things?
I think we saw it with Reagan. The
Yes.
second term had many changes, and we would have seen it. We would have seen it with probably, if he had survived, with Nixon, who had a very radical approach to governance and to national programs, and who was, in fact, a radical president, but he was overwhelmed by his own weakness and his paranoia, which brought Watergate. It can happen. I suggest there are two things. One, that Trump, not being a student of history and being a rather impulsive, in fact, a hugely impulsive person, may do some things that we as a nation will rue if he is president, which right at the moment it doesn't look like. Biden will be what Biden is, a cautious conciliator. I know Biden slightly, very slightly, but his whole career has been conciliation, working across the aisle, and getting things done by that route, certainly not by the Trump route, which is to smash a fist in the face, rather a gentle approach. So if we get Biden, we still have the same problems. There will have to be some sort of emergency healthcare legislation if Obamacare is thrown out by the Supreme Court, and it has to go through a recalcitrant Senate, which we're likely to have. We also have the virus, which is not, and I repeat, is not going to stop suddenly because we have a vaccine. It's going to take at least 2 years or 3 years for the vaccine to take effect, and we don't know what the life of the vaccine will be. I've been talking to people pretty consistently about this, and the conclusion among doctors is not very encouraging. It is that about 1/3 of the people will immediately get the vaccine, 1/3 will wait to see if it's effective and not dangerous, and 1/3, for many reasons, won't get it. The anti-vaccination people, but also people who followed the Trump idea that somehow it's not something that Americans do. And we're going to have the vaccine around. It's going to be a fact of our life for the full 4-year term of the next president, no matter whether it is Biden or Trump. And we're going to also see a lot of emphasis put on Trump's vice president, who is remarkably unknown to us, but who will immediately begin positioning for a run in 4 years, because that's what we
Right.
and maybe Pence will also, the president, vice president, will also start positioning. And what happens with vice presidents is they lose interest in supporting the president as they see the possibility of getting the brass ring themselves.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask a question to both of you guys. If Biden wins, do you think that the reporting on the virus would be different? That is, do you think that all of a sudden, do you think that CNN would continue to run their emphasis on the virus every night? Do you think we would see the numbers go away as a big concern? Or do you know, Llewelyn, do you think that your profession will seek to
My trade, yes.
report the virus in a different way if Biden wins?
I think there might be less hostility to the president. It's going to be very hard for these people who've been, I think, rather pushed by events into a position of hostility. I don't think it's a pre-expectation that they would be as hostile. And I'm really myself quite tired of the hostility on CNN and on the other channel that supports Biden. I think they're going to have a lot of difficulty. It's always difficult when somebody you have favored comes into power to remain objective, to keep a distance, and not to suddenly seem to have turned face. But it is the job of the media to shine a light. And if you shine a light, you get a different result than if you're in the dark. And when we shine the light on Biden, we will find many deficiencies, and they will be, after a while, highlighted just the same way that Trump's have been, except Trump set out to antagonize the media. He followed a dictum laid down by a man called Matt Labash in the Weekly Standard some decades ago, when that paper first started, saying, all you have to do is to go out after the media, if you're right wing, and they will do the job for you, which actually turned out to be true. They will, in fact, do themselves in if all you do is go after the messenger. But the other big lesson of this election is that it wasn't influenced by the media. It was influenced by the tertiary sources of information that most people use to get information, and they're strictly tertiary. They're the public media, and this is now a big force, uncontrolled and really uncharted, ununderstood. But we're in a time when people get what they want to get and nothing else, and this is dangerous. We used to have newspapers that if you flipped through them, you were forced to see something you did not agree with, or we had whole rounded news broadcasts where you saw things you did not agree with, and we all saw the same broadcast. Now we all find our own broadcasts. Some people just want to watch sports, some people just want to watch conservative, some people just love. I think this is a great weakening of the body politic, and I think it puts journalists into a very difficult position. I don't think we are really politicians or politically inclined at all. I think circumstance has pushed a lot of journalists into the seeming liberal camp, and some others selectively have decided to be in the other camp, and I can tell you who they are. They are the employees of Mr. Rupert Murdoch, almost exclusively. Now there's some, trying to catch up with the Murdoch magic. Murdoch is a very interesting man who has not been mentioned in this campaign, that he almost through his publications, and in this country through primarily not through his publications, but through his television, Fox has been able to affect things. In Britain, he affected and maybe brought about Brexit through the solid use of his newspapers to criticize Europe and to demand that Britain leave the common market. And yet this huge power, this electoral power in Britain and in the United States, a very old man, but a cunning and clever one, Rupert Murdoch, has not been, I don't know why people haven't gone after Murdoch. They go after the Fox network. Let's find out who owns it. We know that Murdoch, and I know a lot about Murdoch, I've been around people who work for him and know some members of his family, has somehow come out unscathed. And yet he's a political player wherever he operates, Australia, Britain, America.
You're right.
So let me answer. Give me a shot to answer. So I look at what's going to happen with Biden winning and what the press would do as the fact that if Trump is out of the picture, I have a feeling that cable networks are going to be in trouble. There's already a big trend of not buying cable subscription for anything. People are cutting the cord, going straight to Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney, all of the above. I think that the whole notion of live TV, drama, what Trump brings to the tweeting daily, to CNN, I think CNN will go out of business. I think a lot of these places are going to be toast when Trump is out of the picture, because the drama that drives the need for people to watch is going to be gone. And as we move to a levelized time, there will be no need to go to cable TV anymore. And all the cable networks are toast on the delivery side. Content side is where the money's at. Delivery through the web, internet, straight to customers. So the business model, Trump leaving will accelerate the shift to cutting the cord and changing the business model for media distribution. It will be, more channels, more podcasting, more digital outlets. The broadcasting news, network news will be gone, toast.
That is an interesting hypothesis, because we can say that the president made Twitter what it is today.
Oh yeah.
And we can say that the coverage of the president on CNN was all about the president. If he bumped his head, they were talking about it. If he stumped his toe,
yeah.
They were. So Don Lemon, who's also an LSU Tiger, I might add, looked like they had a personal against the president. So interesting that you're saying that all of this was created by the president, and with his exit, then the new business model will really come in, and cable will essentially disappear, and Twitter will not be as formidable as it is. Because remember, before this president, as Llewelyn said, you pick a certain kind of strategy, and you go and attack the press. But before this president, I mean, Twitter was sort of in the shadows.
Yeah.
I also I agree with John, and partially agree with Anders, because there's a contradiction in what you said. I think it's true that television news across the board is dying, but I assure you, as a lifelong newsman, there's never a shortage of crises, and there's never a shortage of people to blame. So don't worry, there will be plenty going on. In fact, the right-wing media will be much happier with Biden, because they will really have something to go after, the way that the left of the spectrum has gone after Trump. And Fox will be in very good shape, because it will be a daily blast against Biden and all his works and all democratic works, or at least while Rupert Murdoch lives. It may change if he dies. And the other thing is, people are increasingly not watching broadcast news any more than they are buying newspapers. And this is, everybody in the news business knows that they're selling this perishable commodity, which is expensive to produce, hard to get at, and not on the whole very well paid, except for a few people on television. And it's dying, and it's very tragic. It's not going to die totally any more than movies killed the theater totally, but it is in trouble. And television is really, I've seen different waves of trouble for publishing, and I'm including in that.
Yeah.
Let me ask this, in this same tradition. I have seen
the death of magazines, and now the death of television. It's part of continuum as technology changes and makes available new and for people more acceptable options.
Yeah. Well, let me get some wisdom on this question. I have seen in my lifetime also a mismatch between the values of the party system and who's there. So I can tell you without a doubt, as a guy who was born in New Orleans and growing up in high school and college, there was not one white Republican in the South. White Southerners hated Republicans and carpetbaggers. Of course, the Republican Party was created to end slavery. So actually, when I got to Texas, all the Republican parties we used to meet, and it was an all-black party, and that value structure, which is the value of American Lincoln, is enterprise, education, and enterprise. Now we have in America, some of the poorest states are the most conservative. But my question is, how can you be conservative when you have nothing to conserve? So if you look at the party alignment, what will happen to the party of Lincoln, as we like to refer to the Republican Party, with an emphasis on education and business enterprise? And where did the misalignment occur? I mean, so we have some people who say they're Republicans with no Republican values, whereas the Fords were Republicans and the Rockefellers were Republicans. And if you look at the matriculation of the ideology, when my party of Lincoln was invaded by what I call the Dixiecrats, the question is, would there be any kind of other realignment of political parties in America?
I don't know. I have thought for a long time that we needed a new party structure, but every time it's looked like we might get it, it hasn't happened. But I so agree with you. Those who declare themselves to be Republicans are not the Republicans of yesteryear at all. And I was, I suppose, if I haven't.
I would argue that it's already happening and it's in front of us. It's just that we don't think about it, but there are probably 3 factions of the Democrat Party and 3 factions of the Republican Party, if I think holistically. And you can align some of the faces to those factions and what's going to happen. I think what we're witnessing, again, we're digitizing society. And we're witnessing, all the things that we're talking about, cutting the cord, network news will be in trouble, so on. It's not that news are going to die, because people need news. People like to know what's going on. People are, snoopy and want to find out what the neighbors are doing. It's just the delivery mechanism and the method and the sources are going to change. And it's already changing, right? So watch out for Apple and Facebook and Netflix and all these companies to get into the news business, as they have sensors and cameras everywhere, right? I don't know if you do get the news from Apple or Google, but they do broadcast their own news. So
I think you've got to draw a line between broadcast news and print news, because broadcast news is really something that lives off print news.
Yeah.
And cameras, etc. Dirty little secret, and that is that television is incredibly inefficient. It delivers news at about 160 words a minute if there are no pictures, and much slower. But we don't get much news. First day I worked in television, having been a print guy, this was in England many, many decades ago, my boss said to me, "Just the nuggets, King, just the nuggets. This is television." And that's all we get, believe it or not. I remember when I was publishing Defense Week, we once had a huge chunk, 13 minutes of 60 minutes on one of our stories. When I got the script, it was about this big. It was one type page, because by the time they had a few pictures in the interview. And yet what is seductive about television is it seems complete. It all the questions it raises, and in reality, it has raised the wrong questions and answered none of them. And I say that as somebody who produces a television program and is on it.
Yeah. So how can we make sense out of? Let's talk about the states.
Yeah.
Talk about what became blue and what was expected. How did Florida flip, if you will, to become red? And Andreas, this puts some teeth in what you said. Texas almost went blue. It almost went blue if you look at what happened there. And then, of course, if you look at Georgia, Georgia should still be up, right up in the air. And then if you look at, I think Tennessee is up in the air. And then, of course, Pennsylvania is up in the air. What's going on here in terms of given the nature of the presidencies, and when I say that, I mean how the president presents himself. Is it just the base? Is something else going on that we need to talk about? If we look at what's going on with the election now.
Can you guys see my screen?
No.
Yeah.
I can now. Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer to that question is that it's a matter of message, and the message that we have heard from the conservatives, if they are conservative, and I'm in doubt about that, this time around it's very simple, very jingoistic, and very wrapped in large generalities without a lot of detail, whereas the Democratic message has been more nuanced and has failed for that reason, because you have an asymmetrical situation where you have a hard, simple, conservative message coming from Trump, and you have a more diffused, nuanced message coming from Biden. And there is a definite divide in this country along educational lines, somewhat along geographic lines, and along class lines. And whereas at one time, the upper educated classes tended, in my view, to be Republican in the days of Rockefeller and Javits and people like that. Now they are not, or they're not passionately so, and they've been very, very upset by Trump. So we're in a very awkward and strange position. But if you have a very long, strong, single, almost idiotic message that make America great again, is that it's almost idiotic. Maybe it is idiotic. It's certainly banal because it has no detail in it. And that's very hard to resist compared to let's get back to old values and let's maintain norms. And let's, these are diffused arguments against a rather hard, solid. So it's sort of broken paper. The scissors, I don't know where they are.
I agree with that, except my slogan is let's make America Texas great. That's
a different kind of show business.
In terms of economics.
It's a bit late coming in this board. Generally, about 5 minutes in, we get the first Texas.
But here's the deal. I agree. The class.
I was on the phone to Texas this morning with the president of a utility, and I thought about you, and I thought, my God, maybe I will get some of the Texas chauvinism.
Absolutely. But I think you're right. I mean, you look at the big divide is really economic. All right, because if you look at what happened in the 60s, the truth is people can live where they want to live if they have the money. The question is, how far can your money take you? If I try to move somewhere and they say I can't move, I can sue them and walk away with $10 million. It's a fascinating country. So right now, I think the biggest is the haves and the have-nots. And I find it fascinating that does not line up with party anymore. So you're right. In the old days, it was the Republicans are pretty well off, and their relationship with other people was to build the institutions. So Rockefeller built Spelman, and he built the University of Chicago. And so all of these divides that we talk about really are revolving around economics. So my question is, if we take away the handling of the virus by the Trump administration and talk strictly on economic terms, where are we in relationship to the future with Trump and with Biden?
Well, that is a very good question. And if you're out of work, I might find you some as a journalist. It doesn't pay very well. I think the average salary is about $45,000 a year. think you could manage on that. A very good set of questions, and we don't have any exact answer to this. I think the economy would have tripped anyway, that it was running out of steam, and it was running out of steam partly because of very unfortunate decisions by Trump, particularly with fighting with our allies, our export markets, and seeking quite energetically to impose sanctions and tariffs. Tariffs have never helped trade, and without good trade, you don't have a good and successful economy. So I think the economy was headed for some kind of readjustment, and suddenly along came the virus, which has changed things, or maybe it's just delayed things. The stock market, as we've said on this program previously, is a very poor indicator of the total economy. And at this particular point in time, it's an indicator of a lot of money sloshing around the world and no idea where it should go. So it's gone into the stock market, and we had these absurd PEs and the overemphasis on tech companies, the over-expectation, therefore, of tech startups, and, a real tech craziness. I would point out that we used to make billionaires by people who created things like railroads and built cars, and the last non-tech billionaire, I think, was a man who introduced us to Greek yogurt, which wasn't exactly a huge invention, as the Greeks had invented it about 3,000 years earlier. He brought it to America. But the other parts of our economy are suffering. Now, I think one good thing is going to come out of the virus, and that is going to be a surge in biotechnology, biotechnological companies, and investment of brain power and money in medicine, in human life expectancy. And I think that is going to be one of the few good things to come out of the present state of crisis. But it has not been helped, and the economy, the good economy, I think, was not so much helped by Trump as inherited by him, and he was just beginning to hurt it.
Oh, come on. I don't agree with that. So
the data is, John, he's a data man. Take a look at the data.
But if it wasn't for the fact that we're energy independent and all the regulations that have been changed, then we wouldn't be living the boom.
It had nothing to do with the regulations. It had a lot to do with the maturing of technological research that started in the energy crisis, which led largely through the government and partly through the courage of the Mitchell Company to fracking. And fracking was already well underway when Trump arrived and got the bonus.
Oh, absolutely. But don't forget that fracking was invented by a Republican Houston man.
Fracking was, it was George Mitchell and the Mitchell companies, and he basically bet the company. But it also involved huge input from the Department of Energy, largely by one, Abeta Drubert, and two, 3D seismic, and a whole set of technologies that were necessary. And so it was a wonderful collaboration between the government and private industry, and it worked, thank goodness.
Yep. So what I would say, John, if COVID would have not shown up, no doubt the economy would have not stopped, and Trump would have gotten reelected easily. So COVID is, as many people have said, was a gift to the Democratic Party. But look at my screen. What's happening, right? So Biden has a 60% chance of being president. Trump has a 40% chance of being president. There are two states where Biden is leading, and he's leading by a smidgen, right? He's leading by 8,000 votes in one, and he's leading by 50,000 votes in the other, or 60,000 votes in the other. So unless there are millions of votes, to be casted, or 300,000 or 400,000. So that's where we're at, you know. So it's very, that's just what Wall Street is saying. You know, Biden is going to win the presidency, and the Senate's going to stay Republican, and the House will stay Democrat, and Biden is not going to be able to get away with anything, and he'll have to negotiate with the Republicans on the Hill to get anything done, which means the economy is going to stay the course. Everything that is on place is going to stay the course, and we're all going to have happy days.
Yeah, no, so right now it takes 270 to get there, right?
That's right.
So if he wins Michigan, then is that it? So he's at
Biden needs to win one state, and Trump needs to be 4 of the 5. So
Okay.
he needs to flip Michigan or Nevada and win the other 3 that he's leading at.
You remember that Trump has already declared victory last night. So I think we have a mismatch in expectations here.
I think we have
victory
for a right Donnybrook, the likes of which we've never seen before.
He can declare victory.
Will be filing a brief, and there won't be enough judges to sort through the briefs, let alone make decisions on all of these contested issues. And we still, therefore, will face the problem of what happens if Trump doesn't want to go. But I'd like to ask Andre a question, and that is, what eased regulations have boosted business? I've been watching this over-regulation, under-regulation for a very long time, and I've not seen any of these, like the clean power plant. The utilities didn't want it, but they eased those regulations. They've eased some regulations to do with methane releases, and the whole
water. The biggest one is water. Water impacting farmers. Water impacting agriculture, water impacting the growth of any kind of.
I didn't hear you because I was speaking. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the water is the biggest impact on everybody else is water regulations.
Any commodities had an impact, whereas the free movement of technology, to try to regulate that is
well, it's going to putting on tariffs on various technological inputs distorts the domestic market and puts up the cost of goods. So that's a benefit. In many ways, Trump has tried to reintroduce Smoot-Hawley, which is blamed for the Great Depression. I don't think that the economy, if it continued in the rather uncontrolled way, somebody once said that actually was a friend of mine said that being with Trump in charge is like being in a car with a really bad driver. You don't know if it's going to make the turn or if it's going to stay in lane. And we've seen a lot of that. He has been, in terms of the economy, very, very fortunate that the economic growth started after a very difficult initial period, started under Obama. And, we're going to see economic ups and downs anyway. We've had a huge boost in the markets from the success of high-tech stocks. But can that go on forever? I think we need adjustments there. I think we need a reassignment of expectations from the market and from other, expecting more from underperforming parts of our economy. Also, Trump promised to bring all sorts of manufacturing back to the US, particularly Michigan, and it didn't happen. Instead, we had this, we had a lot of rhetoric and very little employment in those industries.
Well, let me ask this question while we're here. Do you think that breaking up a monopoly that's based on intellectualism, I asked this question about 4 weeks ago, and not based on commodity is a good thing? That is, if it is the smartness, if it is the brains that's creating companies that grow in enormous size and big sizes, is it good to break them up? Is it good to break up an intellectual, if you will, monopoly?
Well, I don't have 100% answer, and I'm certainly not doctrinaire about it. Was it good to break up AT&T? The answer is definitely yes. Look at all the creativity that the Baby Bell was brought to market, if we still had AT&T and the black telephone and a PhD every time you wanted to move it, had to come in from the home office. So breaking that up was very constructive. Breaking up Standard Oil on the whole was constructive. Now we're looking at something quite different with these companies. And I think I gave the same answer last time. When they get to a plateau of success, that they start inhibiting new ideas rather than promoting them, then break them up.
Okay. Well, Andre, can we move back? That's a good answer. Can we move back to the possibilities, and let's take two scenarios.
Yep.
If Biden wins, what do we do? And if Trump wins, what do we do? In terms of business enterprise, what are the expectations? Support for enterprise, support for the economy. So let's assume, first of all, that Biden wins.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next step?
Well, I think the Biden administration with the House would be it's friends of high tech, so they're not gonna do anything. They're not gonna do any heavy regulation. That's all driven by the Republicans. So Google and Facebook and all those guys are, will have another day. I think that the healthcare business with the Senate being in charge means that there will not be a Biden plan to expand Obamacare. So the current healthcare companies will be fine. This is why they're up dramatically today. So today the big rebounders, assuming the Biden wins, are high tech. Sort of the healthcare business and energy. I think the market believed Biden on saying that he was not going to change fracking, that he was not going to shut down the oil gas business, and so energy stays up, high tech goes up, healthcare goes up. Congress is not going to get anything done in the next 4 years. Or at least not until the midterm election, and we'll stay the course. We'll stay the course on where we're at.
Well, this assumes that there are no crises, that there are no developments internationally, and that everything is just straight.
Well, Biden is the ultimate diplomat, and he is going to make everybody love us, right? So there will not be any crisis.
I don't know anybody would say that. I certainly wouldn't say it. I think the world is fractious and you've got wars breaking out just about everywhere. You're about to have a huge blow up in the Eastern Mediterranean over the oil there, which is, you've got hardly a part of the world, and you have China doing this. What is the next president going to do if China invades Taiwan? What would Trump do? What would Biden do?
Are you all familiar with China's Belt and Road Initiative that started in 2018?
Yes. It's a very imperial operation. What will we do if China denies our shipping a right to enter the South China Sea, which it has stolen while Trump did nothing, by the way, didn't understand it well enough, and he neutered the State Department, which does understand it. You can't go around just ignoring expertise without eventually getting a result. And the result internationally has been a free-for-all. We've lost any sense of being the country that people look to, both for moral leadership in issues, very important issues like human rights, but also giving material support to the countries that exist. He attacked NATO. He thought it was a financial problem and had nothing to do with money. It had an awful lot to do. Now you have Erdogan, his friend in Turkey, threatening all sorts of things and really endangering NATO. Things are not good in the world. He's befriended Russia. Initially, he gave a pass to China. And then when
Russia is insignificant.
Well, I don't think it's insignificant at all.
I think so.
It's a highly atomic weaponed country, and no highly atomic weaponed country is insignificant in this world.
They can't feed their own people. I mean, China is the problem.
In the moment you get a country that can't feed its own people, it looks externally for a distraction. And I've spent a certain amount of time in Eastern Europe, and all the Eastern Europeans are terrified that the Russian tanks will come back and the US will not be there. And that's true of the Baltic republics in particular. They're all in terror. Why do you think Estonia is so committed to putting every piece of data it can in the cloud? You know, I think the Russians will come and destroy it as they did last time they came, or as the Germans did.
And that's a great point that you're bringing up, an important point. The geopolitical reality of our world is being challenged by digital transformation. And what you want to do is you want to have a good footprint in the cloud, regardless of where you are as a state physically.
Save your identity. You've got, there is, Trump is claiming some sort of Middle Eastern victory, but it's unclear that that is justified at all. We just don't know there are many ugly things going on. You've got the fight between, with Armenia, and there's been no leadership from the US anywhere in the world. Appalling, unbelievable.
But you're equating leadership with being with having our nose in everybody else's business and having
no leadership is being looked up to, having morals, having stature, and being looked to as the strong guy. Look at Europe, it's now looking to China. It always looked to us, but we've slapped its face as so often under Trump that it's looking to China. Therefore, it will concede things to the Chinese that it once would have conceded to the US.
I agree.
The great game is played. That's how diplomacy works. Isolation is not diplomacy. It's not even very good policy.
But the question is, can our taxpayers afford the ongoing policing of the world at the tune of $2 trillion a year?
I have not said one thing about policing of the world. I remember that in 1911, as I was reading, Winston Churchill was accused of wanting to police the world, 1900, 1912. And it was often said, can the British taxpayer afford to police the world? Well, in those days, it actually did. There was a little institution called the British Empire. No, what we need is diplomacy. People need to know where we stand, what we think. And that is
They know that.
And they don't know where we stand, and they don't know what we, because we've been veering all over from the time when Z was featured at Mar-a-Lago to when he became a monster because something changed Trump's mind. We had the Russians interfering in the last election and then were lauded by Trump. Do you think this makes for international security? Do you think this builds respect for the United States? It creates a vacuum and other countries rush in. And at the moment, China is rushing in, Erdogan's rushing in that area and would like to get a hold of Middle East policy. Things are not in good shape. You can sit in the isolation of the cloud, but the cloud doesn't feed people, doesn't repel.
I'll tell you something that
stop atomic explosions.
I'm trying to get a word in here.
Go ahead, John.
Well, let me put some semblances to this conversation. I think that when you look around, you're right, diplomacy is important, but China is trying to get back to where it was. We shouldn't see China as a Johnny-come-lately in the world. You know, I was a professor there in Beijing. It saw itself as a world power intellectually, invented gunpowder, and etc. And Llewelyn is right in the sense that if the world began to say, China, I am being invaded, can you send the military to help us in Eastern Europe? I think that it's very, very interesting that America might be losing its stroke there. And in terms of the isolation, the more isolation that you have, the less diplomacy you can have. I think that's a general proposition. So we don't want to police the entire world. But I think what people are seeing is what China is doing in Africa is the same thing that European countries did around the globe too. If you look at people now turning to China and saying, we are now in the Middle East, can you please send your airplanes to help us? And I think that is the major thing that we're dealing here, because remember, China, as Andre said, China's not going away, but it's not like they are Johnny come lately. Remember when everybody else was living in caves, they were a great civilization.
Well, I think the great sense of that, the Chinese have this great sense of that not having been recognized. But of course, at their time of greatness, they tended to be very isolationist. Who was the emperor who broke up the ships because he didn't want to be a global power. He wanted to be like Texas, happy with himself.
He's a good man. He's a good man.
I just want you all to remember this. It was told by me a long time ago by an old wise man.
Wait a minute, let me give you some music. Let me give you some music.
So remember, it takes money. It takes money to finance wars. It takes money to promote your vision. And there are only two countries that have the money, United States and China.
Well, it doesn't take money for regional wars. Regional wars are fought on their, the old saying that armies march on their stomachs. Regional wars are fought by poor countries frequently. All the regional wars in Africa are fought by extraordinarily poor countries that have rich countries interested in the outcome, but they are not fought by rich countries. And wars have traditionally not always been fought. Defensive wars, like Britain in 1940, was not a richer versus.
So we shouldn't worry about it.
Very quickly, the Third Reich had accumulated wealth, but your supposition there is intriguing, but I fear it is wanting.
Well, my point is, we shouldn't worry about regional wars. They can't come to us. They can't attack us. They don't have the money to attack us. They don't have the technology to attack us.
Maybe you heard about a thing called 9/11, when a regional war came here.
Sure. I'm familiar with it.
In a world in which we have global ability to spin weaponry around the world, drones are a new threat, because suddenly you don't need an intercontinental ballistic missile. You can do it with a drone. We're in a dangerous world. The world has always been dangerous. It may be more dangerous now, and it also can be more hopeful.
Yep, I agree. Okay, John, we settled it. It's a tie. Trump is going to do Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. Biden is going to do Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sundays. We're going to do it COVID style. Nobody will live in the White House. They'll move back to their houses and do it on Zoom on a mask. That's how the country is going to be run going forward.
Wow. Wow. Well, what would Texas do? That's what we don't know. What would Texas?
I think Texas is going to secede from the nation the moment we get saddled with some debt to bail out some other state.
This is the German complaint. They have to bail out other states.
Well, okay.
And I think that Greg Abbott would make for a phenomenal king. King Abbott.
Wow. I thought we were going toward a king now in Washington.
Well, this is great. Boris appropriated the powers of a king without the legality of such an undertaking.
Yes.
Now, some people can aspire to be a king, or you can actually have the name king. So since we already have our king, I just bow to him again.
I always bow to
Llewelyn King.
No, I bow to him.
I've got a pile of telephone calls here.
All right.
Need to respond to.
Johnny, take us away.
Okay. She Ford and a Chevy still lasts 10 years like it should. Good times really over for good. Stop rolling downhill like a snowball headed for hell. Stand up for the flag and let's all ring the Liberty Bell. Let's make a Ford and a Chevy that'll still last 10 years like they should. Cause the good times are not behind us now, and the good times ain't over for good.